We often talk about deer sign and reading sign correctly. And in a lot of cases when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about tracks. I may be talking about rubs or scrapes or something like that, but tracks usually have a lot to do with what I'm talking about when I'm talking about reading sign. And I think a lot of people see a track and that's really all they see. They have a hard time determining whether it's a big buck or if it's fresh. In this video, let's take a look at reading tracks and interpreting tracks. We'll start out with a hunt that I did a couple years back, where I took a nice buck that I found just by finding his track and then putting the pieces of the puzzle together. Then after the hunt, we'll look a little more in depth at some tracks and how to actually read them and get some information out of them. Some of you might remember a hunt that I did in January of 2020 where I killed a mature buck on a conservancy. Well, I killed that buck specifically because I went out scouting to locate a buck and cut his track and recognized it as a mature buck track. So we got a big buck track coming through here, and he's come through twice. The snow's 3 days old. So I'm thinking it's evening because he hasn't come through yet. You know, because this is day 3.
Right.
He's came through 2 days in a row on this trail. And used what I know about the area to figure out where I thought he was bedding, where I thought he was traveling. And that information led to the result of me getting that buck. Hey, you don't even need your hand. That's my size 13 boot right there. Look at the size of that track. That's the one we're after. And there's one of his tracks up there too, next to this boot print, going in the other direction. Yeah. Both directions right here.
Right here. We got another one too. Splayed out.
Oh yeah?
Look at that.
Look at the size of that. That trail's got some big tracks on it. And coming in here back further on the same trail, there's some big ropes. Better get an eyeball on that thing pretty soon if I want to kill it. The season's winding down. Holy. Got me another one. Two old warriors met in the swamp today. Only one's coming out alive. Time to call the pallbearers. Wow, he's got a lot of mass. Oh, look at those giant feet. This is the buck. This is the buck that was leaving the tracks. I got him. Wow, that's a massive buck. Look at that. Nice. Obviously mature. Look at how big he is. That's the buck we were seeing the tracks from. Stride length is important because it tells you it's a mature animal. And when when those hoof prints on one side are further than I can step, you know it's a big buck. I mean, this buck, if you look at this, I mean, you pointed it out. Look at the stride.
Yeah.
Between two steps, I mean, that's a over 4 feet. That's got to be like 5 foot stride.
Yeah.
That's definitely a mature buck, for sure.
Yeah, he's got good stride length. He's just moseying straight up this trail.
But that's how far between the tracks. I can't even step that far. That's a big buck. You know, you want to look at a track and be able to lay 4 fingers in it, you know it's an adult buck. Look at that, those 2 toes. There's a toe there and a toe here. That's
4
like,
finger plus.
that's like 7 fingers. And here's like the dew points way back here. See that?
Yeah.
That is a big buck.
Yeah.
Especially the tracks we were looking at today. They were closed. They weren't splayed. They were closed tracks, and I could lay my whole hand in there. So if you look at this track here, I mean, it's not splayed, and I can get all 4 fingers in it. I know they always look smaller on video, but that's 4 fingers are fitting in there, and it's not splayed. And here he is again here. You can see a little bit of a wedge in there. 4 fingers. It's a good one.
Yeah.
That is obviously a mature buck. And you could look at the weight on that next to the other deer and say that's an animal well over 200 pounds.
Right.
Out in the middle of nowhere, running on this logging road. We just went down here this way and a half an hour ago. Now we come back up, and since then a buck has come up this road, and I want to show you the track. Look at this. Look at that track. There's a whole series of them coming up the road here. But look at that. That is a big track. Holy cow. But generally, the bucks aren't going to go through that real thick stuff. If the tracks go through thick stuff, it's a doe or it's a forkhorn or something.
Right.
They cannot get a big rack through that brush. I can remember a buck I shot, a real nice 8-pointer. That buck was chasing a doe around, and the doe ran into some dogwoods, right down a main trail, into some dogwood. He ran into that, and it was like he hit a net, just all stuck in there, and he backed up and tried ramming through and got stuck again. And he was trying to push his way through there and work his way through there, and finally, he gave up. And I wouldn't have got him because he got through my shooting lane running. But he turned around to go around the brush, and then I shot him.
Yeah.
But he couldn't get through that brush. And I see that a lot with these bigger racks. They can't go through the brush that these does and stuff are going through. So a lot of times they're taking a more open trail than people think.
Yeah.
But you do see that when they go through something a little thicker, you'll see marks where antlers went through. You'll see, but you have to be looking for that stuff. That stuff is not going to pop out at you. You can learn a lot from tracking deer around the woods. I learned a ton about bedding and how deer go into bedding, how they use the wind around bedding, and you can see how the deer lays in the snow. This buck walked in here, started wandering around when he got in here, and walked in, started swaying around, comes in like this, and walks right into this buck bed. You see the tree, you see where the grass is matted down. You can't see the bed because of the snow, but you can see there was a bed here, and that he contemplated laying down. He sat right here and looked around a little bit, but never laid down, and then moved on. And that's telling me that he was contemplating laying down. It was morning time. So he's probably nearby. Tracking deer is one of the biggest teachers out there, and it's way, way underrated. You learn a ton following deer around.
And look at all the buck tracks here where they ripped this mushroom off the tree and were eating it. They find all kinds of food out here in the winter time that you wouldn't suspect.
Tracks can be a huge teacher. That's how the buck's showing you his cards. This is a running track. Notice the toes pushed in, sliding forward beyond the point where they first touched the soil. You can see that the deer slid to a halt. That the points of the toes are under the ground in the front, telling you he slid to a stop. Notice the debris blown forward of the track. A walking deer doesn't blow debris, doesn't blow pieces and chunks of dirt out of the hole. Only a running deer does that. It looks like a fairly fresh track. The edges look sharp. It looks like it's cut, not rounded from wind and rain and overnight dew, getting wet, then drying in the sun. It looks pretty fresh. But the way to really know would be to take a little twig and touch those little dirt balls, the debris balls, and see if they roll freely, or if overnight the dew glued them to the soil. When a track hits wet soil, it'll slide and it'll mush, it'll push. When it hits dry soil, like during the day after it's dried, it'll blow balls and chunks of dirt. So a guy can look at those chunks of dirt and say, well, this is more pushed and wet. It happened when there was dew. Or this is really, pushed and slopped. This happened when it was muddy, when it was raining, or right after a rain. You can look at it and know if it was in the morning, if there's a heavy dew in the morning, or during the night, because of the slide, the wetness of the chunks, how they pushed. You can look at the dryness, the broken off pieces that are crumbly, even if they've gotten wet, and know that that track was made in the evening or during the day, or in the afternoon just after dark, because the dew hadn't set in yet. Take a close look at the edges of the track and the bottom of the track. Does it have detail? Is it a sharp cut edge? Can you see the rim of the soft toe where it meets the hard shell of the hoof? That stuff starts to fade after a day or two. After the dew sets in and the wind hits it and the sun hits it and it's moist and dry and moist and dry, that edge will fade. It'll round. The fingerprint of the track down in the bottom will disappear. Look at this track. This one looks to be a few days old. Walking, but rounded edges, lacking detail. This track doesn't have the slide of a running track, but it's got the blown out debris. It looks like a very fresh track that was photographed right after the deer ran off. Everything has detail. However, you don't see that slide, so I don't think it's a running track. I think it's a trotting track. It blew out the soil, so it was moving at a pace. But it didn't have slide, it didn't have heavy impact. Looks to me like it was just a trot. Deer tracks can be just as identifiable as antlers. To some people, they look at an 8-pointer as an 8-pointer, right? Well, that's an 8-pointer, that's an 8-pointer. But to guys like you and me, you look and you're like, well, that 8-pointer's got this kind of detail, and that 8-pointer's got this kind of detail, and you can tell the difference between two racks. None are the same. Well, tracks are the same if you look close enough. Some tracks sweep out. Some tracks sweep in. Some have real tight hooks on the tips. Some of them have one that hooks one way, one that hooks the other. Some have a very wide track, very splayed, from the heavy weight of the buck. Some are thin and narrow, some are wide and fat. Every track is different, and you can learn the track of a certain buck. You can literally put trail cameras out, rake out the dirt, and when you get a picture of the buck you're looking for, you can look at that track. When you see or jump a nice buck, even if it's just a regular deer, it's a good idea to go over and look at the track and learn from it. Look at what it looks like fresh. Look at the shape of the track. Look at how it moves through the woods. If it's a big buck and you want to memorize the track, go over there and take a look at it. One thing that helped me when I first started tracking and trying to age tracks, which is a hard process. People have to learn how to age a track. I used to like to take a foot, stick it in the mud, take a picture of it. Take my foot, stick it in dry sand, take a picture of it. And go back every day for a week and take a picture. A real detailed close-up picture. And look at the detail of the pictures and think about what's different. What's different from day to day. And if you do this a couple times, you can do it right in your yard, you'll get good at aging tracks. There's certain things that are hard to explain, but you can see it with your eye. And if you look enough, and if you practice enough, you can get really good at tracking deer and reading tracks. The front hoof is a lot bigger than the back hoof. All their weight's on their front feet. They sink deeper, they're bigger, they're roundeder. The back feet are the small feet on a deer. Now on a buck, going through the woods, he's got a small hip and a big chest. His back feet step inside of the front feet. On a doe, she has a wide birthing hip and a small front chest, right? So her back feet, the smaller feet, step to the outside. A lot of times when they're walking, their hind feet will step inside their front feet. And you look, is it to the outside or is it to the inside? Most people that think of tracks, think of tracks in snow. If you live in an area that has snow. Now snow ain't no different than dirt. You're still looking for that fine cut track. You're looking for the detail. The thing about snow is it's a lot easier to age tracks because a little bit of melting you can see it. A powdery snow, if it melts a little and freezes, you can see that. So the changes are a little more quick, especially in the sun. The biggest difference between snow tracks and dirt tracks is snow tracks, when they melt out, they'll look huge. You can take a 1.5-year-old buck, and when the snow tracks melt, it looks like, to a novice, it looks like a giant, coffee can track if it's melted out. So think about how long it's been there, if the sun's melted it, that kind of thing. Still look at that stride length. Look at where the foot placement is. I hope you enjoyed this show. Do me a favor, click the subscribe button, hit the like button, and leave a comment, and let us know what you'd like to see in future shows.